All right, I'm so excited to be here and to be back. It was great in 2011. I have fantastic memories of this event. And I'm going to start the way that my daddy used to start anytime he spoke. My father was a preacher, and he would say, if you woke up this morning clothed and in your right mind, you should be grateful. He'd look out at the congregation and he'd say, I know it's early and there are 1,000 other places that you could be. Maybe you were out late last night. Maybe your friends don't know why this is where you would choose to spend your Sunday morning, but here you are, and you should be grateful because you are around a group, you're in the presence of believers, and it's here where you will find hope, where you'll find joy, and where you can find strength for tomorrow. Now, my daddy is no longer with us. He passed away actually doing what he loved, using his voice to uplift and empower others. But in his honor and memory today, I say to you, I am grateful. I know it's early, and there are 1,000 other places that you could be. And your friends may not understand why this is where you would be on a Saturday morning, and yet you are here. You're in the presence of believers. People who, like me, believe that miracles are possible when people engage. The world can transform when people speak up and use the tools that they have at their disposal, their voice, their talent, their time, their passion, and yes, their technology to make their lives and their communities better. We are believers, and it's here together that we can find hope and joy and strength for tomorrow. Now see, when he used to say it, people would get really excited. People would shout and jump up and down and get really excited because they were honest about the fact that they needed something. They needed some hope. They needed a little bit of joy. They needed a little bit of strength. They were vulnerable enough to say that, yeah, I could use a little help doing this thing called life. I may have a good job, I may have a great family, I may have my own home, whatever the case may be, but I could use some support. There's some things that I might not know, or some things I need to be reminded of, or some things that I could stand to learn. Now, in our professional world, we're not always that open, honest, and vulnerable, right? We say that we come to the conferences to network. We're here to meet other people. We're here to maybe, I don't know if you're getting any credit for this for your class. We're here to show up and make sure that someone else sees that I came. We've got all these wonderful, honest reasons. But I would also venture to say that maybe, just maybe, there's some stuff you might not know. And that you could use a little bit of joy, a little bit of hope, a little bit of strength for tomorrow, and a little bit of instruction and insight on how to do this thing called changing the world that we all say we're so committed to doing. That you might be able to use a little bit more support and help and guidance in this space that we call civic engagement and civic life. So that's what I'm here to share with you a little bit today, and I'm not the only one. You're going to have a tremendous group of speakers who are here to share with you what they know. You're going to hear a lot of important information. You're going to learn how to leverage technology for good, to engage people in civic life. You're going to hear about what's cutting edge, what the current trends are. You're going to learn about digital media, what the themes are around civic engagement and innovation, all of that stuff. You're going to get a lay of the land today. You'll probably hear some stats. You'll hear stats about millennial voter participation and volunteerism and issue activism and philanthropy. And if you're smart, you'll take some notes. You'll listen intently to all the speakers and the folks who are working in today's landscape with the hope of maybe getting some insight on how to do something. How to do civic engagement, how to do politics, how to do social entrepreneurship, how to do digital media. I remember the last time I was here in 2011, and thank you again for having me back. I was at a point in my life where I was obsessed with the doing. Everywhere I went, I was trying to find actionable tips, and then I would go share them. I wanted to do and do and do to change the world, and I wanted to help others do and do, so that's all I did. I gave those tips. By then, I'd run a national organization focused on youth civic engagement. I had been a part of the leadership team that was responsible for the youth vote in 2008. I'd had meetings with White House strategists, and I was a senior advisor at that time working with a tech incubator whose mission was to support online social change initiatives. And through that work, it was a one-of-its-kind incubator. Through that work, we had supported organizations online that had gone on to engage millions and millions of people around issues that mattered to them. So anytime I went to speak, whether it was at a university or at a conference or on television, my focus was on action items. What can people do? Because that's what people wanted to know, right? How can I do either what you've done or something similar? I would constantly scour my life and the life of my colleagues to find those tips and those action items so that people could execute and get things done. But the truth is that while I was doing all that work, all the doing, I was very unsettled. I felt really unfulfilled. I remember being on a plane, coming home from my honeymoon in 2012. It was a great trip. I was very, very happy to be married. And I'd come back, and I had this sinking feeling that I didn't want to go back to work. Now you say, well, I feel that way every morning, Erica. I get it. But there was something different this time. I couldn't figure out what it was, but I just had this feeling of dread, and I'd never felt that before. I love the work that I do, or at least I thought I did. So I said, let me stop thinking about this. I pulled out a magazine, and it was Fast Company. I'm obsessed with Fast Company magazine. I love it, right? So I was reading, and I was flipping through the pages and seeing all these stories of millennials who were changing the world. I swear to you, I saw that phrase in that magazine about 90 times, just in one issue, change the world. Everyone was changing the world. And suddenly I felt like, well, maybe I'm not. Maybe I'm not changing the world as much as I could be, or maybe I'm not doing it in the way that is most natural to me. It doesn't feel right. Something about the way in which I'm doing this work doesn't feel authentic. It's not fun for me. It stopped being fun. It wasn't culturally relevant and engaging. I didn't feel spiritually connected to it. I didn't feel creatively connected to it. It just felt right. It felt like I was just doing the right thing. And I didn't know what to do with that feeling, so I hemmed and hawed, and I thought about it for several days. And then I quit my job. And let me pause here. I am not that person, okay? I am not the person who says, I woke up one morning feeling unfulfilled, so I quit my job and I took a trip around the world. And I went to Italy and I ate pasta and I fell in love. And then I went to India and I did yoga. That's not me. That's not my life. I had bills to pay. I didn't know what I was going to do, but I really felt compelled to walk away because something didn't feel right. I knew that I wanted to engage media more. I knew that I wanted to understand media. Up until that point, all I had done was be an on-camera person. I had been talent, as they say in the industry. I'd come on and given commentary about politics and social change and millennials and race and gender. And it was great. I loved the platform, but it didn't feel right. But I knew I still cared about media. I knew I absolutely still cared about empowering people and giving people the support and tools they needed to make their lives and the lives of their community better. And I didn't know how to mesh those two things together in a way that felt more creative and more fun and more natural to me. So I did what most people do when they don't know what to do. And that is, look at all the other people that society says are doing the thing you want to do better than you. Now, we know who those people are because we see them every day. There's all the lists. Top 25 under 25. Top 30 under 30. The top 40 under 40. Top 50, just top 50. They don't do 50 under 50. They just say 50. Right? The 100 most creative people in business, the 100 most creative people in nonprofits. We see all of the lists. And so I started to study them. And I wanted to know, okay, how had they gone from point A to point B in their career? And certain narratives emerged. There was kind of this recurring story that I observed that was happening over and over again, at least as I saw it and as I read it and as it was publicized. And that story went something like this. A bright and gifted young visionary identifies a problem in the world. Then they know exactly how they want to solve it. So they build an app. And everything changes. Within 2 years, they sell the company for millions of dollars, and now they travel the world telling other young people how to build apps that will change the world. Or maybe the narrative went something like this. A bright and gifted young visionary goes to an unnamed country in Africa, because countries in Africa have no names in these stories. They see some children and they figure out a way to help them using hats or soccer balls. I'm not mocking these things because these are pretty brilliant ideas. And within 2 years, the company is running successfully and they are supremely happy and they will do this work forever. And I saw variations of those stories over and over and over again, and they were inspiring and they were impressive and they weren't me. I didn't see myself in those stories. And I think it's because the narrative was so simple. It seemed so easy. It didn't take into account the realities of what it means to change the world. It didn't talk about the fact that when you're drowning in student debt, it's hard to decide you're going to quit your job and go make hats, right? It didn't talk about the fact that everyone doesn't have access to the same resources for their startup. Everybody can't live in their parents' basement and work on their startup for 5 years. I certainly couldn't. It didn't talk about the fact that sometimes all of the doing all the right things and all the smart things and meeting all the right people, going to the right conferences and networking and shaking all the right hands and building using the right strategies still doesn't yield the results that you want in the world. It sometimes doesn't. And those stories didn't take any of that into account. So I realized that the strategy of looking at what other people did for action items and for tips and to create some sort of clear step-by-step path was just not going to work for me. And neither was all the stuff that I'd spent years learning. It was valuable. It had some value in the world, but it wasn't going to help me in that moment of transition when I needed to figure out what to do with my life in a way that still made an impact but also was right for me. I knew that I was embarking on a journey, a challenging journey. I mean, figuring out your life is challenging anyway, let alone if your life is committed to helping others and committed to civic engagement. That's really hard. I recognized that I didn't need to know how to do it. I needed to know how to be the kind of person who could do it. I needed to learn how to be someone who could deal with the instability and uncertainty of our times, who could deal with all the paradoxes that technology creates in our lives, all of the opportunities and yet limitations that many of us are faced with. I wanted to understand how to be the kind of person who could give myself wholeheartedly and fully to this work to make the world better and also not lose sight of myself. How could I be a person who was a natural-born leader, as people always said, but then not really even believe in the model of traditional old-school leadership? How could I be a person out in front but not make it all about me? Those are the questions that I had. And I wasn't hearing those at the conferences I went to. I wasn't reading about that in Fast Company. No shade. So I needed to understand how I could be this person in the world. And I wonder if maybe any of you have those same questions. Now, of course, on the surface, you will have very practical questions. Many of you are here today with questions about how are people using technology to change the world? That is what the conference is about. How can I grow my organization? How do I get this number of people to see my content and to share it? How do I get this thing that I'm building to work or to grow? How do I get investors? Whatever your questions may be, but I would venture to argue that underneath you also have some questions about how to be. How do I do this thing for the long haul? How do I sustain this investment that I have in my community once I'm off campus and out in the world and having to pay my bills and deal with real life outside of this environment? In our world that is rapidly changing, not just every week, not just every day, not just every hour, but oh my gosh, every single second, how do you navigate that? So I spent the next few years trying to answer that question, how to be in the civic space, in the cyber age, in the digital world, and not lose myself and not lose focus on who I want to be. I did it by experimenting, I did it by failing, I did it by asking a heck of a lot of questions of the people around me, the people who I thought deep down inside were probably just like me, even though they looked like they had it all together. And in the process, I discovered some truths about social change. And I want to share just 5 of them with you today. I promise I will make it relevant to digital media and to technology. But I want to share these 5 truths that I've learned. They're just my vantage point and my experience about changing the world. And with each one, offer a suggestion about how to be in light of that truth. Does that sound good? Is that okay? All right. So the first truth that I discovered that no one really prepared me for is that moments of high activity and high engagement will come and go, and they will come and go, and they will come and go over and over and over again, and the only thing that you can do is be consistent. I remember in 2008, I felt like this is it. We have reached peak engagement, and there's no going back. The tides have turned. And it wasn't about Obama, it was about us. This wave of youth engagement and engagement across all demographic groups. We were excited and we felt like we can do this thing. We can change the world. And now I felt like, and gosh, America has now seen, or our generation has seen, what that looks like, what that could yield when we go all in. Now, I'd heard the cliche that, change and movement work and all of this, it's a marathon, not a sprint. So I knew that. I wasn't expecting anything to magically change overnight, nor was I expecting the work of fixing our communities or engaging everyone to be easy. But I thought, you know what, at least now, if I'm going to be running that marathon, I've got millions and millions of people that will be running right by my side. Everywhere I turned, there were indicators that thought was true. We saw new startups form. We saw a surge in not just voting, but volunteerism and philanthropy, social media activism. But then came 2009. And before I knew it, me and 2 of my colleagues were sitting in the White House in a meeting with 2 senior advisors, and they were staring at us and asking us very directly, where are your people? Where are all of the young people that you said were engaged and that you said you knew how to engage, that you said you had the tools and that this was the moment? Where are those young people that came out to vote? Because we need them now. We need them now to actually pass the policy that they voted for, and we don't see them. So Erica and others, tell us, where are they? And I didn't have an answer, and it devastated me. We did everything right. We had the campaigns around healthcare, and we convened the youth town halls, and we started new social media hashtags, and we went knocking door to door. We did the offline and the online. We had every strategy. We got celebrities engaged in the campaign. We did everything we thought we knew how to do, and we were anticipating that same wave of excitement and energy that we had just seen 1 year before, and it was gone. Now, there were a million reasons for that, right? And we don't have to get into all of those today. But that feeling that I felt, it sucked. I didn't understand. I felt it again. I guess I didn't learn my lesson then. I felt it again in 2012. After the killing of Trayvon Martin, suddenly everyone was talking about race and racism. What does it mean? What does it look like? How is it embedded in the laws? I felt like this is a moment for that national conversation on race we keep saying we're going to have, the conversation. It's happening now in 2012. And then what? Now, things happened. There are movements that are absolutely strong and still going, but this surge of energy and activity from people who had not previously been engaged, I thought would continue. And some would argue it hasn't in the way that maybe we anticipated then. See, the reason I was so unprepared for each of these waves, each of these surges, is that everyone had told me social change and civic engagement is like a mountain. You just got to climb. They lied. See, because here's the difference. Climbing a mountain, it may be hard, it may be slow, but you're always going up. It's not really how this world works. It's more like a roller coaster. right? With high highs and sharp turns and deep drops and dips, and you don't know what's happening next. And it's exhausting. Yeah, exhilarating. I'm not a roller coaster person, so for me that is scary and terrifying and frustrating. And I didn't know that. I didn't know that sometimes it could feel like you're doing everything right, and you've got all the right work and all the right people, but nothing's working. Everyone votes one day, and the next day, voter turnout is low, and voting laws have become more restrictive, and you feel like you're not just back at square one, but you're now back at -4. And in our society, those turns happen at a rapid pace because of our attention span. So the size of your team, those folks who are with you, those folks who get it, who get the work, sometimes it doesn't get bigger, it gets smaller, and that's frustrating. And when I felt that and learned that lesson, I turned to a quote from Dr. King. Pause here. I do not normally quote Dr. King. It is very cliche, I know, and his quotes are overused and often misused, so I promised myself I would only quote him if it was obscure and I could sound cool doing it. So here we go. I found this quote in a speech titled, "Don't Sleep Through the Revolution." And he said, "The saving of our world from pending doom will come not through the complacent adjustment of the conforming majority, but through the creative maladjustment of a non-conforming minority." What does that mean? I'll read it one more time. "The saving of our world from pending doom will come not through the complacent adjustment of the conforming majority, but through the creative maladjustment of a non-conforming minority." Basically, what he was saying was that saving our world and changing our world and doing this work that we do, it's actually not going to happen because we get the majority of people to become comfortable with the idea of change and revolution. Not going to happen. It's going to happen because we get a group of non-conforming people who are uncomfortable with the status quo to creatively engage. And that will always be a minority. You'll never have everyone. Those surges will never stay permanently high, and that's okay. And I wish someone had told me that the only thing you are responsible for doing is being consistent and sticking the course, staying the course. That'll save you a lot of time and a lot of tears. The second truth that I wish someone had told me and that I learned is that there is no single way to do this work because almost everything will change. So how to be? Be flexible. When I walked away from my job, it wasn't just my job that I walked away from. I kind of walked away from politics in general, at least traditional politics. I was finished with it all. And people were surprised because prior to that, they thought I had it all together. They thought I had this path laid out, and I knew what I was doing, and I had this organization, and then the next step is you're supposed to do this, and then you're supposed to do that. But I didn't. And for a moment, I said, there's nothing around me that looks like anything I want to do. And then within 6 months, I started to see this little glimmer of light. Things were changing in the world around me. Suddenly, there was this spark of social impact media opening up. A company called Upworthy was born, and Good magazine started to get popular, and Participant Productions, and all these little organizations and businesses and media entities started focusing on doing good. Heck, even the Oprah Winfrey Network launched. I'm like, okay, there's a space for positive, feel-good, social change media. That wasn't there maybe 6 months before. Everything changed. And so it had to settle in my mind that doing social good work, doing civic innovation work, civic engagement, it can be anything. It doesn't always look the same way. It doesn't look like I have to work at a nonprofit or I have to run a social enterprise. I became determined to see the work of civic engagement as more than electoral politics and government and nonprofit, because it is. Civic engagement is all the ways that people relate to and touch and feel and impact the systems of the world around them and the people who live with them in that world. So I had to be flexible. And I committed to never too deeply invest in one particular strategy or one particular organization or one particular tool. Instead, I was invested in the vision. I was invested in my idea of what the world could look like, and everything else in between was flexible. In the world of media and digital media and social change, we've seen what happens when you invest too wholeheartedly in even one platform and one strategy. Facebook. I don't know if any of you pay attention to kind of the trends in digital publishing, but when digital publishers first, like BuzzFeed, and even the one that I work with, Upworthy, when we first came on the scene, the only name in the game was Facebook traffic. You had to have your content optimized for Facebook. Well, we don't run Facebook. We don't control Facebook. You don't control Facebook. Facebook controls Facebook. And when they want to change an algorithm and when they want to change what content you see in front of you, everything has changed. And companies had to scramble and figure out, whoa, what do we do next? Our traffic doesn't look the same. All these changes happen because you can't invest in one idea. You have to be invested in the mission. Whatever your mission is, the mission of your work, and everything else is up for grabs. The world will change around you in ways that are beyond your control. They'll shake the foundation of everything that you have built, especially in the realm of technology, and that is okay. The more you embrace it and the more flexible you are, the more you will be able to adapt and innovate and grow. Number 3, the third truth. No amount of strategy or technology will change the fact that people are people, offline and on. So be human. I often get asked to come speak on digital media strategy because of my work primarily at Upworthy. And while there certainly is some special sauce to growing a social good digital media company, and there absolutely is, it's also not rocket science when you get down to why do people share the content they share, or why do they do the things they do? Why do they use the tools they use and use them in the ways that they use them? It's not really that complicated. People want to feel something. People want to feel good, generally. And if they don't feel good, they at least want to feel empowered. They share things and they engage when they feel empowered to do so. And as we look at other behaviors, not just digital engagement, but offline, the way people engage with one another, the way that we engage with organizations and institutions and campaigns, almost all of it can be boiled down to people's basic core needs, their wants, their desires, and their habits. This is as true for all forms of civic engagement as it is for all relationships. You don't have to hack the internet. You got to hack people. You got to understand what makes people tick. Why do they do what they do? Why do they care about what they care about? Why do they respond to certain things in certain ways? The tools that you use will change and they'll evolve based on what's new and what's being built. But ultimately, at the core of all of it is human behavior. And in the process, you're recognizing that if they're human, and by they I mean the people that you're serving, the people that you're engaging, if you call them your users, if you call them your constituents, if you call them your community and your friends, when you recognize and remember that they're human, you'll also remember, hey, I'm human too, right? And as I do this work, I have basic needs. And I have to think about my desires and my talents and my passions and proclivities. And when those two things align, that's where the magic of civic engagement happens. The fourth truth that I want to share, brace yourselves because this one's a shocker. This one knocked me off my feet when I figured this out a couple years ago. And I'm talking specifically, everything I've said so far is transferable no matter what age you are, but this one, I'm talking to my millennials, my Gen Y. We're here. That's me. Although a lot of you are younger than me, I'm an older millennial. Here's the truth that I wish I'd really grasped. You, us, we, this fabulous, beautiful, brilliant, big, diverse generation, we are unique, but we are not special. So you got to be humble. Now, see, people tend to use those terms interchangeably. Special, unique, it's all the same. But when you look up their actual definitions, they're very vastly different contexts for them. When I look up the word unique, I see being the only one of its kind, unlike anything else. And that you and we are. That is 100% true, because no generation is just like the generation before it, nor will it be just like the generation after it. No individual is just like the person who came before them or the person who will come after. You are absolutely unique. And in particular, when you look at the context in which our generation and those younger than us have grown, have developed, it will blow your mind. Digital natives coming of age in a time when technology was at our fingertips, coming of age at a time when every system around us that we were taught was supposed to support us or sustain us or guide us was, for all intents and purposes, broken, whether that be religious institutions, which we know that millennials largely don't identify with, whether we're talking about political institutions, parties, which we know millennials largely don't identify with, whether we're talking about public education, which many of us experienced and benefited from, but also we know for real there were some problems and it was a little bit broken. Almost nothing around us worked the way we were told it was going to work. That matters. That's nothing to laugh at or shake your head or say, oh, yeah, they're whining. No, that's real, right? Because we've come of age in a post-Katrina world, what does it mean to live in a post-9/11 world? What will it mean to live in a post-Donald Trump world? I don't know. That was totally nonpartisan. But no matter what happens, the point is, this is a crazy time to be alive. And so you are absolutely unique. But early on in my career, I ran a millennial organization. I used the word millennial about 75 times a day. It was millennial this, millennial that, Gen Y, young, youth. I really kind of thought that we were also special. See, when I look at the definition of special, special gives the connotation of better, greater, prized, exceptional. All the hype says that we are, right? But when you believe that, you miss out on so much that there is to learn. Years ago, I was coordinating a civil rights conference at Tulane University, and it brought together about 50 national civil and human rights leaders. Some legends were in that room, right? Some folks who have been doing civil rights work since the 50s and 60s, right, who marched with Dr. King. And then we also had a bunch of young folks like me, and even younger than me. And it was a 3-day conference. We were talking just kind of about the challenges of civil and human rights work and what the next frontier issues would be. And then on the last day, it became clear that there was kind of this divide amongst the group, you know, that the younger people in the room, myself included, had kind of had this sense, and many of you, if you've done movement work, which is a little bit different, it's kind of a specific subset of civic engagement and civic work, so I don't assume that everyone here has or identifies their work in that way. But if you have, you've probably heard this narrative that like, the older folks are elders, the generation, the people that came before, they won't move over, right? They won't just give us the reins and let us lead. They don't want to see things in new ways. They won't let us, you know, just run things how we know they should be run, because they don't get it, they don't get us, and they're darn it, they're taking our spot. And that was the sense there that weekend, that a lot of us were kind of, it was unspoken, but that's how we felt. These, you know, organizations, the leaders had been in the same position, some of them 20 years, and we were like, oh, goodness gracious, because there's no place to move up here. Where are you going to go? So that tension was palpable in the room. And during one of the small breakout groups, we had an elder in the group with us, and he called it out. And he said, you know, we're sensing that every time we talk about strategy, every time that we talk about a plan, that you all you're not into it. You're not excited about it. What's the problem? And someone in the group was bold enough, maybe it was me, was bold enough to say, well, you know, people feel like you're holding seats at the table that you know, younger people should have. You all had it when you were younger. You were, you know, leading the movement, and now you won't let us. And I'll never, as long as I live, forget his answer. It was very practical. It wasn't, you know, super inspirational, but it was powerful. He said, you know, I hear that a lot. Young people want us to move over, to go, to leave our posts at these organizations. He said, where would we go? When we were doing the work and building these organizations, there were no 401ks in the marches with Dr. King. We didn't have retirement plans and Roth IRAs. We don't have, you know, multi-million-dollar funded boards for us to sit on and an executive board. Where do you want us to go? And it was like my mind was blown open in that moment because it was a perspective I'd never considered. It didn't change the reality of the fact that we needed more integrated leadership, that we needed elders to listen to younger folks and vice versa, but it was a new perspective. And it reminded me in that moment, gosh, they were dealing with some of the same stuff we are. That my grandmother cared about her community just as much as I care about mine, just as much as her grandmother, who couldn't even read and write, did. When we realize that our passion and desire to make the world better, it's not special. We're not the only ones. We're not the only ones who want cleaner air and water or safer roads or better ways to be heard by the powers that be, or frankly, new structures for power. We're not that special. And I say that to say that we then have to listen. Not just to elders, right? But also to anyone who has come before us doing something that we might even have considered a failure, right? When we launch into these industries with our new ideas, we're so quick to say, clearly what's been going on is not working. So I've got the right idea. I've got the new idea, right? Use Snapchat. Gosh, that's the answer, right? And we don't listen. We don't learn. We don't observe. We don't ask. We don't ask the questions. We assume that our new ways are right and that everyone else's are wrong. But remember that in this work that you do, even in all of our and your youthful brilliance, don't ever think that you don't have things in common with the people that you serve, the people that you are trying to engage, and the people that came before. I would venture to guess that many of the people in this room this morning, by virtue of the fact that you are here at 9 a.m. on a Saturday, probably think you're a little special, right? Because you are unique. Most people aren't doing this work, and you may think, but I'm the one who cares. I'm the only one. None of my friends care about this stuff as much as I do. Maybe they don't know the tools to express it. Maybe there are other things happening in their lives that make them unable to participate in the same way that you are. Your job as the person who has the tools and who has the knowledge is to help give them the space to act out the values that they do share with you. So always remember that, and then be humble. That humility will draw others to you. That's the name of the game, right? In civic engagement, you're trying to draw others into this world where their voices matter, into this world where they recognize their power. We recognize our power. The only way you can do that is if you are humble and recognize that while you are unique, many of us are all the same. The last lesson, the last truth that I've learned on this journey is the one that I found to be the most encouraging. That you don't have to be the most brilliant or the most radical or the most funded. What you must be is convinced. You must be convinced beyond the shadow of a doubt that your vision of the world is possible. One of my heroes, Brian Stevenson, he's a human rights activist. He's the author of the amazing book, Just Mercy. He says that you don't change the world with the ideas in your mind. Ultimately, you change the world with the conviction in your heart. You don't have to have the biggest idea, even in the age of technology and in the cyber age where everyone is looking for the next big thing. You don't have to have it. What you have to have is a dogged, undeniable belief in a vision of the world that you believe is possible. Because, see, there's a lot to be doubtful about. There's a lot to be unconvinced about, and it's okay to have doubt and to wonder. In fact, you should. There'll be days when the doubt is going to crash against you like a tidal wave, and you're going to question everything. You're going to question your strategy. You'll question your fitness for this work. You'll question your peers. You'll question your leaders. You'll question, should they be leaders? You'll doubt every single system that you work within. But what you can't doubt is the belief that another world and another way is possible, because that is what will sustain you. Through the booms and the busts, through the new technology, the new issues, through the waves of engagement, through the good jobs and the bad jobs, through the being underpaid and the debt, through all of it, it's that vision that you have that can't be shaken, even if everything else is. So I look around at the world today, and I see two realities. I see a world where division and hatred and disconnection from one another is actually popular. Popular. It trends, it shares. I see a world where fear is our guiding principle, and where technology is used to actually make our world smaller, to spread hate, to make us less empathetic and accustomed to people and ideas that are different from our own, where algorithms and not curiosity drive our learning, where our voices get crowded out by institutions that have voices, and they also have more money and more access than many of us will ever hope to have, where democracy has become a code for hypocrisy, and where people in our society who have the most to gain and the most to lose are given nothing and losing everything, where everyone talks, and they talk about engagement, about equality, about giving, about generosity, but not enough participate and fight and give and walk into the hard places and do the hard things. I hate to tell you, but that world is real. But I also see glimpses of a vision that many of us share for what this world can be. And everywhere I turn, I see those too, those very real rays of light that are cracking through those rocks, the roses that are coming up from the concrete. It's evidence that the world we want is possible. I see technology being used to connect and engage and expand. I see people developing new power structures and new leadership models. I see people having the hard conversations about who we want to be and how we can become it. I see people using their voice, using technology to raise their voice, but also using it to listen and to hear from those around them. I see barriers that once existed between people and systems, and people and institutions, and people falling down. So, what is civic life in the cyber age? It's knowing that both of those realities exist at the same time, but having the freedom and the tools to creatively and effectively build upon the one that you want. You do this by being consistent, by being flexible, human, humble, and convinced that everyone has the power to shape the world we live in. If we do that together, we will. Whether you're building the next code for America or knocking on doors for an electoral race. And as you go through the rest of your day, I want you to evaluate everything you hear through this lens of, how can I be? How can I be the person that can do the thing? How can I be the person that can sustain the work? How can I be the person that can help realize the vision? How can I be the person that doesn't lose myself in service of it? If you do that, you'll not only have a great day today, but I really genuinely hope you will have a great and fulfilling life. Thank you so much.